Hi, this is Samuel Cook. Welcome to Search Engine Watch and a new feature that we're running at Search Engine called the Google Hangout Marketing Show. And I'm interviewing today my guest, Enge from Stone Temple Consulting. He's also the author of the book, The Art of SEO. And he's a contributing author to Search Engine Land and also Search Engine Watch. And his Stone Temple media interview series has a large following among internet marketing professionals. So with that introduction, we're going to go ahead and get started today. And Eric, the format of this show is I'm going to ask you how you got into the industry. So go ahead and tell us your story about how you got into internet marketing and specifically how you got into the field you're in right now as a search engine optimization specialist.
Sure. So there are two parts to that. I got my first exposure to the internet when I was working for a company called Phoenix Technologies. And we actually had a deal with a company called Quantum Computer Services, which later became America Online, to help them get distribution for their service into PC manufacturers, what we call the OEM channel. And my group at the company had that product line as one of its responsibilities. And we drove hundreds of thousands of subscribers a year into AOL, which doesn't seem like a huge number these days, but at that time it was actually very, very significant. But that really didn't get me into search per se. That was just my first exposure to internet marketing. Later on, I actually had a consulting business focused on actually doing business development consulting for people. And I had a friend of mine who had a job as a CEO for a company, and he asked me to come in and help him with business development. It was actually a DVD e-tailer. And I spent a couple of months trying to figure out how to put together business deals for him. And after a while, I said, I went back to him and I said, Steve, that's his name, Steve, what you really need is search engine traffic. Let's figure out how to do that. And I began, playing with that and trying to figure out how to make that work. And as I understand it, a year later, we were doing millions of dollars of revenue in search engine traffic, sales from search engine traffic. And hopefully, being a reasonably intelligent guy, I said to myself, this seems pretty interesting. Let's do more of that. And I actually started getting into search engine optimization from then on out in a more serious way, and not long after that, it was pretty much full time.
Okay, and what was your, just to go back a little bit, what was your background before you got into this? Did you come from traditional marketing, or what was your skill set leading into getting into online marketing? What prepared you for it?
Yeah, originally I was actually a developer. If you go way back, I did hardware engineering for a few years, and then I got into software. So I was a coder, and then I developed to managing people, writing code. So technical background, and which is really good because in the world of SEO, it's really helpful to be able to talk with a developer and learn some coding specifics. I'm not going to be the guy to go write the code for you now. Those days are long gone. I still dabble a little bit in Perl, but that's just for little tools and things. But that technical background is very helpful. I actually, from there, evolved into a role where I was a general management for a business unit at Phoenix Technologies, the company I mentioned before. So I kind of got into the business and marketing side of things. And from that, I learned what I call the thrill of the deal. Mm-hmm. Getting a deal closed, it's like, oh yeah, it's like you get fired up, you pulled one in, got the fresh kill, if you want to call it that. because a lot of people in sales or general business think of themselves as hunters, right? It's like
Yeah.
trying to bring in the food,
which is very comforting for your clients, right?
yeah, exactly. But what was good about that is when you think about the world of SEO, it's really useful to have a technical understanding and a business and marketing understanding, because it spans both worlds, right? You need to understand the reasons why search engines don't inherently understand the way your site is built just because you built it. And there are reasons for that. But on the other hand, you've got to be able to relate this into the marketing message and things you do to promote the site, which in the SEO world we typically talk about link building, and more and more these days social media is part of that conversation too. But having that understanding on both sides is really cool. And last thing I'll say about that, what I like about it is because I like being able to shift from one thing to another. One moment I'm being quite technical and I'm learning exactly how, just to throw out a random example, how HTML5 and CSS3 interact to do responsive web design, which is a very technical thing. And then the next moment, I'm trying to think of a content marketing strategy for a major brand. So it's kind of cool to have both those things going on.
So typical entrepreneurial personality type where you have to be doing multiple random things at once to be happy, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, as I tell people who consider being entrepreneurs, hey, it doesn't matter if you're the CEO. If the garbage needs to be taken out, you take it out, because that's the choice. I mean, that's the way it happens, right? So you got to have the mentality for that, and I definitely do.
So, and that leads me into a question, because one of the main topic today that I think we want to update the listeners on is the state of search engine optimization, which is the direction that Google's taking, not just where they are right now, but where everyone has been bitten in the last few years by the Penguin and Panda updates. So every time a new one comes out, everyone's nervous to see what's happened to their site. So what I'd like you to do is kind of give us a broad trajectory of where you've seen search engine optimization come and where it's going, and specifically, talk through the trend that if a listener were to hear this as a search engine specialist, what broad rules can you follow so that Google will not end up slapping you on the next round of Penguin and Panda updates?
Yeah, I think what I want to do is I want to start you with a common misconception, because it leads to what those rules are. Okay, people think that Google is making large changes to what they want publishers of websites to do, and actually there's been very, very little change in that. Right, where the real changes come is in their ability to enforce what they want people to do. And there's a very important mentality for people to get. They have always wanted a link to be a citation, similar to what our, just as one example, to what a professor puts at the end of a research paper they've written. They always cite the most important documents they reference. And you can't buy that space, or maybe you can, but no one would ever think to buy that space, right? So it's really that reference in that professor's paper is only there because it's the best stuff related to their paper. And that's what Google has always wanted a link to be. In fact, the fundamental underpinning of the algorithm is around this notion of the link being a citation, right? And I'm focusing on links for the moment. I'm happy to add some comments on on-site content and Panda in a moment. But so what Penguin changed is Google's capability to algorithmically measure when somebody is off the beaten path or off where they want them to be, and allows them to assess ranking adjustments to people who are doing things that are less favorable to them.
And
The
you're
other
talking
thing,
about links right now, right?
I am focusing on links. There's a
Okay.
corollary conversation for on-site content, but when we're talking about issues with links, we're really talking about two types of things that Google does. One is Penguin, which, the algorithmic approach, and Penguin 2.0 is right around the corner. It'll hit very, very soon. It's going to be a major shockwave to the market, actually, in my opinion. I actually wrote about this in Search Engine Watch about a month ago. But the other thing that happens is that they've also beefed up their capability to do manual reviews of link profiles. And personally, I believe the way they do that is they'll have algorithms flag questionable practices which aren't questionable enough for them to take an algorithmic ranking adjustment on, but they're questionable enough for someone to look at and come up with an assessment. And they've really beefed up that side of things as well. So what happens is people see the new algorithm come out, or they get an unnatural links message in their webmaster tools, and they feel like Google has changed the rules of the game, and they really haven't. They've changed their ability to enact enforcement for those rules. Yeah. And they are only going to get better. They're going to get better and better at this. Penguin 2.0, I think, will be a bit of a wake-up call. I think, unfortunately, a lot of people are going to get hurt, some of which might be so far down the beaten path of being cheaters that maybe you don't feel so bad, but there's going to be a lot of people you feel bad for because maybe they didn't know better. Not everybody's an experienced SEO, right? Yeah. And they may fall into using an SEO firm that does some bad things for them, and then they get slapped, and that's unfortunate. But you're going to see a lot more of Google's ability to improve enforcement. So I'll stop there. I'll mention, if you want me to, I can go a little bit into Panda, and I can go a little bit into non-ranking penalty things as trends too, if you'd like.
Well, and that brings me to a good point. Is Penguin is Google's algorithm regarding backlinks. So there's, as I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong here, there's two main updates. One is Panda, which deals with on-site.
Yes.
And then Penguin deals with off-site. So those are the two main ranking factors for Google, right?
Well, they're two. Well, you use the term ranking factors. There's actually hundreds of ranking factors. But in terms of new algorithms that have really caused a large impact on the industry, Penguin and Panda are it. You're right to refer to Panda as being about on-page content. The thing that a lot of people don't understand how Panda works. There's probably less known about that in the industry than Penguin by far. And it's a very few success stories. If you type in Panda recovery success story or Google Panda recovery, you're going to find almost nothing. Okay? And the few people who claim they've had a recovery aren't offering any proof, and they aren't discussing any of the things they did to recover. Now, we've actually done a lot of work in this area ourselves. We haven't published any articles on it. I will also claim at least one recovery for a site we worked on. And really, but what went into what we found is that Panda is what Google calls a document classifier. Okay? And by document classifier, what that means is they look at the content on page, and then they make some judgments as to whether or not it's submitting a profile that indicates that it will tend to be a lower quality page. All right? Not much is known about how they're profiling it. I can give you some speculation based on the people I've talked to and the limited experience we have with Panda recoveries. One One speculation is that there's a thing that I call sameness, meaning not duplicate content, which is its own animal, right? Sameness to me is the concept that there's nothing really new being discussed. Mm-hmm. So if you do a search on a given space, like mortgage tips, I did this yesterday. In fact, if you do a query in title, colon, and then in double quotes, mortgage tips, which basically says that that exact phrase has to be in the title, there's tens of thousands of pages to come up. Okay? And you know, Google probably needs 5, really, to offer good search results. They don't need tens of thousands, right? Yeah. And their job is to figure out which are the best ones. Well, one way you could do that, and again, this is speculation, I want to be clear, but one way you could do that is you could do an analysis of what I'll call the document space. Yeah. And in that analysis, you could see all the different kind of general topics that are covered by people who write about mortgage tips, right? And you'll find they write about the process of applying for loans and you know, how to handle inspections, and you'll come up with a list of maybe 20 topics. And then if you look at those tens of thousands of documents, you'll find that 90% of them try to address at least 70% of the topics or more. Okay, so from a sameness principle, nothing differentiates all those tens of thousands of sites. Now, there'll be a few that are much more vertically oriented. Even though it said mortgage tips, they're talking only about the process of applying for a loan, or only about the process of the home inspection, or whatever. They get much more vertical. So leave them out of the equation. Right now, I've got tens of thousands of documents. For all I know, they're writing the same crap, right?
With article rewriting software and people, right?
Well, it could be that bad, and it could even be a genuine site. But even if it's a genuine effort, right? If I were to sit down and try to write that article for some site I've been working on, I'd actually try to write the best article possible. I really would, because that's just the way we do our SEO here. We don't do any of that low-quality stuff. But the problem is, okay, I'm in the morass of all the other sites. So now that I'm identified as being in the morass, what's my authority?
Yeah.
Why do you care about my opinion over the other tens of thousands, right? Now, this is actually a pretty good description for what a ranking algorithm might look like without Panda, but what I think Panda added was some different ways to evaluate whether you're in the sort of mass of nothing special.
Yeah.
Okay? That's what I think they added. So they now have a much better ability to recognize that there's nothing special about you, and you don't have the authority to match. So down you go.
Yeah.
Right? And it's just a ranking factor. It's important for people to know that. It's not a penalty. It's a ranking factor from their perspective.
Well, you know, one of the things as I've been studying search engine optimization, we were talking yesterday in our pre-call about how every marketing company has their niche, and my niche or my specialty as a marketer is on sales funnel development with email marketing. Yep. But as I've studied SEO to try and find the right people to do it in partnership with what I do, really what I've heard is what Google wants is put yourself in someone's shoes. They sit down in front of a computer and they're looking for a Chinese restaurant in Midtown Manhattan. Well, if Google gives them 2 Italian restaurants that have 1 Chinese menu item and an Irish pub in those results, how long do you think people are going to continue using Google? So what Google wants to do is give people what they really want. And regarding Panda, I think one of the things I've heard on that is Google's now looking at page speed, how quickly people bounce from your page, your bounce rate, how long people stay on the site, if people do conversions, which are goals that you mark in there. So I think there's a lot of things that Google is doing and trying to upgrade their system to do to just find out if people are actually getting something of value from you. And I think the point you brought out was great, which is nothing Google's wanted has ever changed. They always want the customer to get the exact most relevant search result for what they typed in, but the technology that they're using to get there is just continually getting better, and it's getting much better than any marketing company's ability to game the system is, because you're not Google. No marketing company will be able to outmaneuver Google in technology. I think that's what you're saying.
Yes, and I'm just going to add one point of clarification. There is definitely a lot of speculation that measurements of user engagement is a key part of Panda. I've participated in some of that speculation. I think it's still possible that that's the case, but something that I try to do when I listen to statements Google makes is I try to treat their word choices very seriously. You know, a lot of people want to leap to Matt Cott's, doing overt misrepresentations, and there are times where he needs to be cagey. I know that, but when he says something like Panda is a document classifier, you need to remember that Matt's an engineer. That phrase was chosen very, very carefully. I think you can put it in the bank that Panda is a document classifier. And when I think that and the supporting statements they put around that, that leads me away from engagement being measured directly. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not ready to say that it's not involved at all, but I think in the early days of Panda, it was not directly involved. That's just my take on it. And I was influenced in this rather significantly not too long ago by an interaction I had with a guy called Michael Martinez, who shared some of his experiences. So just be aware that I think what Google is most likely spending most of their energy doing is looking at the profile of what content looks like that is likely to lead to poor user engagement.
So they haven't got as advanced as some people think they are yet, but it could be coming.
Yeah, and there's another way to underscore that is so many people think that it's about them, and it's not about them. I mean, the way the process works, and this is something that Google has said in public statements, and is basically they identify a set of problems, okay, test cases for things that they don't like in the results. They send that to the algorithm team, and the algorithm team, tries to come up with something to address a large percentage of the problems, okay, and then they run a variety of tests using raters, internal raters, okay, to see how they like the results. And if the internal raters like the results, then they will push that out to the general, a small slice of the general marketplace, maybe 1% of all searchers, or even less than 1% of all searchers, which in Google is still a boatload of people, right? And they'll measure interactions and they'll make sure that it's good. But what they're evaluating is whether the interaction with the overall search results en masse has improved. So they're actually not trying to get the rating of your individual website correct. They're not trying to figure out whether you should be site 237 or site 122. Does not matter to them. What matters to them is whether the interaction with page 1 has significantly improved, and maybe even just the first few results. That's the goal for them. But if they get those right, they've pretty much done their job. Whether they get number 7 and 8 even in the right order isn't really their job.
That's an interesting point for people to bring up, or to bring up to marketers, is unless you get in the top 5 search results where people don't have to scroll, you're really not a player in that phrase. I mean, what are the latest percentages you've seen in terms of engagement with different numbers in the search results?
Yeah, there's been a few different studies. They're all all reasonably flawed for various reasons. The richest data set was the one originally released by America Online many years ago, and there's been some studies since then, but those studies haven't been based on an entire search engine, even a small one like AOL. And the AOL study showed 42% click result number 1, and less than half of that click result number 2. So the slope was very steep. Other studies have shown less drastic slopes, but any study I've ever seen, the bulk of the action is in the top 5, and off the first page, basically crickets.
You might as well go find a new phrase or something else to do, right?
Right, exactly.
Or you can buy Google AdWords, which is certainly what they want you to do.
That sounds like an excellent idea. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Matt, so thank you very much for the broad overview of the industry and where they're going. So in the future, we can expect Google to just get better and better, and whether or not some of the points I brought up that are speculation on Panda have happened yet, eventually things like that could happen. So the main point here that I'm hearing from you is just think of your ideal customer and give them something that's more interesting than anyone else, and find ways to get it out there. And if people like and share it and tweet it, then Google's going to help you out, right?
In principle, it should work that way, right? The frustrating part of it is that Google's algorithms are their algorithms, right? And but at the high level, you're right. You have to start with users being the first objective, and offering a superior experience. There's really, in my opinion, no other choice. And I do know there are people who think differently. But honestly, that's the way we've focused our efforts for, I don't know, 7, 8 years, and it works. I mean, you can think of it as learning what the search engines want you to do, which is focus on users, but with there are some refinements to that statement, which I'll get to, and then do what they want you to do exceedingly well. Do it better than the other guy. Execute extremely well, and you should be fine. I do want to note that there are still limits in the search engine's ability to process your site. So, for example, while there's plenty of technology for reading and figuring out what's in images out there, it's not practical for Google to use that in a real-time basis in their algorithms. So they don't do that as an integrated part of the main web search engine. It's not practical for them to process a video and understand all the content. Again, technology exists where they could do that with a certain degree of accuracy. Google has that technology, but it's not something that's integrated into the main web search. They need help with site architecture. You need to pick title tags carefully so that they can understand what a page is about, and put text-based content on the page to help them understand. So there are still things you need to do to be search engine aware. But even as you do those things, you have to have the user as your first objective. So that's the refinement I would put to the statement.
Okay. So that's the broad view for everyone on where search engine optimization has been and where it's going. I think the way you broke it down for us is really useful, which is Google's never changed their objective. They're just getting better at enforcing it. And if people could always understand that Google has the user as their, because if Google becomes the, if Bing or some other search engine comes in and becomes the default search browser of choice for people, then Google's out of business. They could care less about businesses that are just trying to game the search results. And anyone who gamed it and then got slapped, you really have no right to be mad at Google, because if you weren't focusing on the customer, then you just weren't doing the right thing anyway.
Yeah.
So I think that's a fantastic way for us to think about it.
Yep.
now we're zooming down in from the strategic level to the tactical level. What is the latest update that you wrote about on Search Engine Watch that everyone needs to be aware of regarding the Penguin updates?
I wrote an article called Penguin 2.0 Forewarning, the Google Perspective on Links. And I shared my thoughts on link building, and this has led to us to define a concept we call the 5 judgments of link quality. It's really important to understand, you know, what really does define a quality link and how you can come to your own appreciation of that. So see if I remember them all. And by the way, this article I wrote was tweeted by Matt Cutts with the note, good article by Enge. But in any case, the first one is, would you have obtained this link if Google and Bing did not exist? And that's a really good one, because that really helps people think about what the perspective is. A lot of people have trouble getting their arms around that because it's hard for them to imagine that world, and they'll say, well, they do exist. So the next one is, if you had just a couple of minutes with a prospective customer and you were legally required to show them a random sampling of links from your link profile, what are your chances of getting embarrassed by the link, right? And there's a corollary to that, which I call, would you show it to your children?
Or your mom, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so those are you know, 3 of what I call the judgments. Okay, now I'm challenged here. I've got to remember the other 2. Was it really intended as a genuine endorsement by the person giving the link? I mean, did they knowingly say, I'm linking to this because it's a really great resource for my users, right? And then the final one, which is one of my favorites, if you have to make an argument that it's a good link, it's not.
If you have to defend your position.
Yeah, the point being is no justification is required for a really legitimate good link. Yeah, I mean, you see, oh, yeah, okay. You know, Walt Marsberg decided to write about you in the Wall Street Journal, and he linked to your site because he thought it was the best, you know, blah, 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 whatever your business is out there. And that's pretty high standard. But if you can pass those 5 tests, then you're in pretty good shape.
Which is why if you do get a link in the Wall Street Journal or New York Times, which has good editorial control, and Google trusts them, then that link is worth more than 1,000 other links.
For example.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so finally, so we've kind of started out with your background and then looked at the broader view of SEO. Now we're just zooming down into the latest Google updates. Part of this show I'd like to do for every specialist is, because Google Hangout, which is a new technology, which, by the way, we'll have to have another Google Hangout discussing just the impact of Google Hangouts on search results and YouTube results. But what the Google Hangout allows us to do is do a screen share.
Yeah.
And what I'd like to do is, I gave you this link yesterday, is I have a client, and we have a page that it really is designed for the user. It's getting a good opt-in rate, good engagement rate from those who come to it from paid traffic. But it's a new page, and just get some advice from you looking at it on how to make it better, because we haven't really, I don't think my team has gone in and done the dedicated on-page work on this. So I'm going to do a quick screen share, and I'd just like you to talk me through what you see. And you know, I'm going to use WordPress because I know that's probably the most common platform out there, but anyone who has Joomla or any other site with a content management system will be able to do similar things following along here. Yep. So let me pull that up.
Okay.
All right.
Got your screen?
Yeah.
And we're doing smart triathlon training, how to set a PR while training 30% less. Well, this sounds like good advice, actually. Well, I don't know if it's good advice, but it sounds like a very interesting topic. Okay, so keep scrolling down, if you will. Okay, so there's an interview. Okay, go back up to the top. I'm going to have you move around a little bit just so I can get a feeling for the page. I did look at this a little bit before, but okay, great. And then scroll down again, slowly again. Let's just get a sense for the whole page.
So Eric, one thing we did was we did a transcript. This is a Google Hangout. It's about an hour long. We did a transcript of the entire interview because of what you said, which is Google doesn't have the ability to use videos yet.
Yep.
In their search results, so we help them out by putting the transcript, which is done by a human here.
Yep.
This goes all the way down.
Yeah, okay, so nothing really changes to the footer, I'm imagining. So why don't you jump me to the footer? So, okay, so it's just a typical type of footer with a few advertisers and a few links, and then a little bit of text here about TriDot with a few anchor text-rich links to other places on the site. Okay, why don't we go all the way back up to the top and we can start talking a little bit about this. First of all, it's nice that there's a video. One question I would ask is where the video is hosted. If it's hosted on YouTube, I think that's a good thing, personally. YouTube is, some people say, the second largest search engine on the web. I actually think that's based on data before Bing and Yahoo did their deal. So I'm not sure they still are, but it doesn't matter. They have a tremendous amount of search volume. And in a market like triathlon training, I'm going to imagine that there's a fair amount of people searching for related content on YouTube. So that's an opportunity for the website, which they might want to think about. The key, and I won't go into too much depth about it, one of the big keys to succeeding in ranking on YouTube is driving lots of views to your video. So there's a few opportunities to do that by, one, allowing people to find the video on YouTube in the first place, but also continuing to have it on your site, potentially letting other people publish it on their sites. I think would be good. So I think that's a good opportunity. The fact that you've transcribed this thing is really good. That gives a lot of text fodder for the search engine. I'm going to guess that this is a couple of thousand words. You might consider breaking that into multiple pages. I'm thinking about that more as a user experience issue.
Yeah, you would just break it down into next, maybe 1 of 5. Okay.
If you do that, you'd use rel prev next. Okay. For the various pages. You'd have to look that up online rather than have me detail it right now. But just search for rel prev next, and you'll find good documentation on how to do that. So I would consider doing that. I don't know if that's so much directly an SEO issue as it is a user experience issue, and at some level, I think the user experience is useful from an SEO perspective. The other thing is the title for the post was Smart Triathlon Training.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody did any keyword research as to whether that's the right phrase. And you can use a keyword research tool like the Google AdWords keyword tool to potentially consider another phrase. I haven't tried looking at an alternate phrase for you, but that is something you could consider. Now, by the way, you don't have to change the title of the article. There are plugins for WordPress that allow you to set a separate title tag for the web page, which is different than the title of the article, right?
And what plugin do you recommend? I know there's a number of them. Which one? I'm just looking at my WordPress back here, and we don't have a plugin installed. Which one do you recommend for WordPress?
Well, Yoast makes some good ones. I'm sorry, I don't remember the name of it, but Joost. You can search on his plugins. There's one called the All-in-One SEO Pack that both do a pretty good job. So yeah, there's Clicky by Yoast.
Is this it? WordPress SEO?
WordPress SEO by Yoast. There we go. That's one of them. Yes.
Okay.
So that's an example of one that people can consider that will allow them to set a separate title tag. So that's kind of the on-page kind of stuff. There wasn't a lot of froth on this page, which is good. I mean, you know. Oh, the other thing I would look at is meta description tag for the web page.
I'm going to go pull that up right now.
Okay. And then,
did you see one on there? Because I don't think we did one yet.
Yeah, it's really good to write one. Basically, what you want to do with that meta description is if you can, it's an opportunity to get the user to understand what they get by visiting this particular article page. So this looks like a fairly generic, fairly generic description, and I think you want to really say, you know, something like Jeff Bocher is an expert triathlon coach who gives his best tips on how to improve your time. Yeah, I'm talking about the meta description now rather than yeah, something like that. So these are opportunities to play with that.
Yeah, and I'll just finish typing this. But triathlon coach Jeff Boer discusses top triathlon training.
Yeah, our expert tips for getting more out of your triathlon training. So it's, you know, so it doesn't just repeat what's in the title tag.
Engaged, and they actually want to click on this article, and then you just put on their blogs, which is really going to hurt their SEO rankings compared to people who do take the time to do that. That's
right.
Okay. All right. Well, I updated that page, but I mean, it really is that easy for people who have a content management system such as WordPress. And I think that let me just take it off screen share here. Well, Eric, thank you so much for that. Not only your broad overall view of SEO, but that practical demonstration. I think a lot of times people read articles or hear things, but don't know how to take action. So that just those tips on how to revise a title tag or activate a plugin like Yoast is great.
Yep.
So hey, thank you. I'm sorry we don't have a little bit more time, but we certainly just leaves us more to talk about next time, because I'd love to have you back on the show here.
Sure.
So, well, Eric, go ahead.
Yeah, well, my pleasure, and well, I was going to say, and thank you. I appreciate your having me on. I don't know if I'm the inaugural show, but I'm one of the early ones, so yeah. Look forward to doing more.
Yeah, Eric, and where can we find more information about you?
At stonetemple.com. Yeah.
And you also have a book out called The Art of SEO.
Yeah,
and,
that's right.
And you can also find him on Search Engine Watch. Just go Google his name in Search Engine Watch. In fact, in Google, you come up first in Search Engine Watch, not on Stone Temple. So,
interesting.
They're doing a good job of getting your name out there.
Yeah, well, I think we've had some articles this year have done quite well, so that's probably helped with that.
Okay.
Excellent. Well, thanks, Sam. Appreciate it, and we'll look forward to the next one.
Thanks a lot, Eric.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
Yep, bye.
And thanks for joining us, everyone, for the first edition of Search Engine Watch's Google Hangout. on the Marketing Show. I'll be back next week with another episode.